Think Future TV. I'm your host, Chris Kalabukas, and once again we're coming at you live from deep, deep, deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California, the innovation capital of the world. Haven't decided yet if I'm going to keep that in the intro. We're talking innovation, startups, the future, not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. So, let's talk a little bit about startups and why they fail. You know, the startup press is so positive all the time. They're so optimistic all the time that they very rarely report on failures. And over the last little while, you've seen a couple of failures and a little bit of talk about failures. You hear talks about dead unicorns. Oh, maybe so-and-so will be the first dead unicorn and blah, blah, blah. And there's a little bit of talk about failures, but there's really not a lot. Because the startup press is so overly optimistic, they're not really so funny. They're kind of the reverse of the regular press. You know, the regular press, if something bad happens, they're all over it. It's all over the news. But if something bad happens in the startup press, they suppress it. Oh, no, we can't say negative things about startups. So startups are wonderful. Startups are great. Startups never fail. And we all know that startups do fail. It's 90% of startups fail. So you see article after article every now and then about why startup fails. Here are the 7 top reasons why startups fail. The textual analysis of why startups fail. There's a site called autopsy.io. I don't know if you go there, but it's kind of like F Company for the new world. I don't know if you guys remember F Company. It's something that was launched in the early 2000s to document companies that are failing and going under. Autopsy.io is very similar. But they did a textual analysis on it, and the number one word that came up was product. Now, when I was a kid, maybe when I was a teenager, I always loved computers. I was one of the first people to get like a Commodore 64. I didn't want to get a VIC-20. My friends were getting VIC-20s. I wanted to get a Commodore 64. I got all sorts of stuff, and I talking to my dad about my future career plans, and I said, Dad, I'm going to go into computers. And this is before the internet, so it was pre-internet days, and I wouldn't say I would go into the internet. And he said, no, don't go into computers. Don't go into computers. They're just a fad. Computers are a fad. Go into real estate or even be a barber. I thought to myself, why would I want to be a barber? Well, and I said, why would I want to be a barber? Why would I want to go into real estate? And he goes, computers, they're just a fad. But everybody needs a haircut and everybody needs a house. Everybody needs somewhere to live. So I guess in his way, at the time I went, what are you talking about? But in his way, what he was saying is that do something people want. Sell something people need. And this is the same lesson that all these startups are learning, is that the number one reason why they fail is that no one really wanted what you were selling, or not enough people wanted what you were selling, or even no one wanted what you were selling. You were having a tough time selling your product. And the reason you're having a tough time selling your product, there's a tough time getting traction for your product, is that it's the cold hard fact that no one really wanted it, or not enough people wanted it for it to be saleable. I'll give an example. I was talking to somebody who had this great startup idea, and it was a fantastic startup idea. And we were looking at it, and it was an idea in the customer service space. And she was describing this great idea that would greatly improve customer service for the customer. And I said, that's great. And then we went and did a little bit of market testing, and we found out that companies would not pay to improve the customer service experience for the customer that much. They were okay with the customer service experience where it was. It wasn't a profit center for them. It was a cost center. So they didn't want to spend more money on it. They wanted just less of it. Okay. And this product wouldn't give you less of it. It would just give customers a better experience. So they didn't really want it. So if you think about it, let's say, and it's not even just for startups. It's not just a startup thing. It's for any business. If you are struggling as a business trying to sell your product, maybe the reason is is that no one really wants it. There's so many great startups out there that are great ideas, but really there is no demand for it. I mean, look at something like HomeJoy. HomeJoy, great startup, great idea, but was there really a demand for it? No, there wasn't a demand for it. There wasn't enough of a demand for it to keep it going. So if you're having a trouble, like I said, it doesn't necessarily be a startup. Let's say you're just like any kind of business that you're doing anything in. You're a dry cleaner, you're a restaurant, you're whatever. If you're having trouble getting people in the door, if you're having trouble selling your product, maybe people just don't want it. You can get the best salespeople in the world, the best marketers in the world, and you still can't sell your product because nobody wants it. I know it sounds like a cold, hard truth. And sometimes you can't be the one to figure that out. Sometimes you're so invested in your startup, you're so invested in your product that you think, this thing's got to fly. It's got to fly. If I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, it's eventually going to fly. It may never fly because nobody wants it. So like I said, what you should do in those cases, if you're really having trouble getting traction, talk to an outside agency, talk to third parties, talk to people, do some market testing, really, really find out, take a good, long, hard look at your product and determine whether or not enough people really want it or need it. Remember, there's the difference between the haircuts and cupcakes. Like I said on my blog, haircuts everyone needs. Cupcakes everyone wants. So as long as your product fits into one of those two things, one of those two categories, or even somewhere in between, then you're probably okay. But if it's something people don't need or want, then you have to take a good long hard look at, do you still need to be selling this thing, and should you pivot? I mean, it's happened before. There's plenty of really successful companies that pivoted into where they are today. In fact, famously, Flickr is a pivot. Slack is a pivot. There's a lot of these famous companies. In fact, Twitter is kind of like more of a skunkworks sort of thing. A lot of these famous companies pivoted to where they are. So don't be afraid of the pivot. If it turns out, and the thing is, the beauty of the internet today is that you can create an idea, put it out there, and if it doesn't get traction almost right away, then you can pivot, and it doesn't cost you all that much money. But don't be afraid of the pivot if you have to. So that's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.